I wanted Max Crosby. I know Danny and Nick and all the little analytics gurus out there thought, oh, you gave up 2 firsts, that's too much. But I will say I would rather have had this have worked out the original way.
Okay.
Where they gave up the 2 first-round picks. Okay. They got Max Crosby because he is one of the few guys in the game that wrecks it. And he does. And that's what they need. And I also thought, well, let me say this too. He wasn't just this great pass rusher, or isn't just. He is also a great guy against the run. And that's unusual for a lot of the great edge rushers. He's one of the few that's great in both ways. And I also just thought, and I said this, he embodied what Ravens are about, right? Like his personality, his tough guy image, the rebel, like all that I thought was perfect for the Ravens. So I was distraught when it happened or didn't happen. But I thought Trey Hendrickson and keeping the draft picks was a great consolation prize. Trey actually has, now I don't think he's as good as Crosby, but he does have more sacks than Crosby. Not only in the last 4 years, I think he's got two more of the last 4 years, and that's only playing 7 games last year. But he's got like 14 more over the last 6 years. So he is a sack machine. He's not as good, as versatile with the run and all that stuff, but he's a great consolation prize. You get to keep the draft picks. Maybe they get an offensive lineman. We know they need some interior offensive linemen, maybe somebody else on the defensive line, whatever. But again, I would have preferred Mad Max, but I can live with this. I think they're still contenders.
Fair.
Okay, yeah, listen, I have been kept in the dark all day, intentionally. I was like, is Brou going to be sad? Is he going to be devastated, happy? And I feel like you've come out somewhere like a reasonable middle of you preferred Crosby, good consolation prize. And they're 4th and 5th in pressures over the last 4 years. In terms of pure pass rushers, they are similar. Crosby's a better player.
Yes.
Right? Like, we put this together just to show it. Like, they are very similar pass rushers, but to your point, Crosby plays all 3 downs. He's much better against the run. Yeah. He's a couple of years younger than Hendrickson. Crosby's a better player.
Yeah.
But I told you on Monday that I thought it was too much to give up for a 29-year-old coming off of knee surgery. And so the fact that you can get a very comparable pass rusher, and whatever the difference is between Hendrickson and Crosby, one of the best drafting teams in the NFL, your Baltimore Ravens, should be able to make up that difference with the 14th pick in this draft.
There's no question that this situation ultimately benefits the Baltimore Ravens more than the alternative path they were initially pursuing. Max Crosby is unequivocally the superior player, and I believe he would have integrated seamlessly into their defensive culture while bringing exactly the kind of disruptive presence that elevates an entire unit. The concern about Baltimore surrendering too much compensation becomes largely irrelevant when you consider their organizational mindset. They were clearly pushing all their chips to the center of the table, maximizing their immediate championship window, going for broke with full commitment. That approach has worked repeatedly for the Los Angeles Rams, and there's no fundamental reason it couldn't succeed in Baltimore. However, when you present the actual choice the Ravens faced, surrendering 2 first-round selections for Max Crosby versus retaining those picks and signing Trey Hendrickson, the calculus shifts considerably. There's legitimate concern that the final year or 2 of Hendrickson's deal might not age particularly well. Father Time remains undefeated, and 32 is 32. But even accounting for that potential decline, I'd rather allocate financial resources and preserve premium draft capital. We're talking about the 14th overall selection in this year's draft. That's not a throwaway pick. That's a foundational piece. If Baltimore performs at an elite level this season, that future first-rounder becomes less valuable anyway. That's the kind of problem you want to have. Winning creates lower draft positions, which is a trade-off any contender accepts. But having the flexibility to make that choice rather than having it forced upon you matters. When both options are laid out side by side, Crosby for 2 firsts, or Hendrickson with picks retained, I'm taking the latter path every time. The age differential exists. Crosby at 29, Hendrickson at 32. But examine the financials. Crosby's contract averages $28 million annually, with $91.5 million guaranteed. Hendrickson's deal comes in at $35.5 million over a different structure with $60 million guaranteed. From a pure financial standpoint, you're positioning yourself favorably while potentially receiving comparable statistical production. I wouldn't become overly fixated on this decision. Both the Bengals and Raiders have experienced wildly divergent team circumstances since 2021. Defensive statistics get distorted when your offense struggles to sustain drives, when injuries decimate surrounding talent, when you're consistently playing from behind, and opponents run the ball to drain clock. Stats in those situations can be genuinely misleading. That's not where I'd zero in for evaluation. The production from Hendrickson will be legitimate. Will it match Crosby's ceiling? Probably not across every metric, but the gap can be offset by the flexibility retained draft capital provides. That versatility matters tremendously. Baltimore can now do things they couldn't previously consider. They could even trade that first-round pick for something else entirely, another receiver perhaps, if they wanted to get aggressive. I'm not suggesting that's their plan, but the option exists. More likely, they'll draft someone, and the question becomes whether that player can make an immediate impact in year one. That answer depends heavily on position and individual. Some players hit the ground running and become elite immediately. Others require a season or two to acclimate. Sometimes it's position dependent. Certain roles translate faster than others. Sometimes it's purely individual. You might draft a defensive player who dominates from day one, or you might draft one who needs time to develop. Wide receivers follow similar patterns. Some explode immediately, others show flashes before breaking out in year two. Predicting with certainty how quickly a prospect will acclimate involves significant dice rolling. Running backs might be the exception. If the offensive line is functional, a talented back typically produces immediately. Quarterbacks have their own developmental trajectory entirely. But for most positions, projecting immediate impact requires acknowledging significant uncertainty. The fundamental question for Baltimore involves their perceived timeline. Do they view themselves as having a longer window where patience remains viable? They know Lamar Jackson won't play forever, but they've hired a new coaching staff and might accept that reaching full steam ahead requires a season of adjustment. Alternatively, do they believe they have 2 to 3 years of maximal Jackson performance before everything becomes a roll of the dice? That mindset demands pushing every chip forward, mortgaging the future in pursuit of immediate glory. They seem to be embracing that all-in approach initially. And let's be clear. Mortgaging your future isn't the same as sacrificing it entirely. It's risking it, gambling that the payoff justifies the cost. They appeared ready to make that bet. Then circumstances shifted, they pulled back, and now they've made alternative moves without committing those 2 first-rounders. In a strange way, they still possess that draft capital if another unbelievable player becomes available and they can make the finances work. I'm not suggesting such a player exists or that they should pursue that path. But the flexibility now exists to evaluate opportunities as they arise. We can see how immediately aggressive they're willing to be based on what they do with this newfound flexibility. Technically, if another star became available for 1 or 2 first-round picks, they could pivot immediately. I'm fascinated to see how they utilize this position. My assumption remains that they'll simply draft players and develop them. But I'm genuinely curious about how the draft unfolds for them. My typical perspective holds that most players need a season or two to reach full speed. The only reason I hesitate in stating that confidently is what we witnessed in 2024 with Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell on Philadelphia's defense. They stepped in and performed immediately at an elite level. That example makes me question whether I can assert the developmental timeline as confidently as I once did. I'm still working through where my mind lands on that question. The Ravens now have options they didn't possess before. Whether they capitalize on that flexibility or simply use the picks as intended remains to be seen. But their offseason just became considerably more interesting to monitor. I want to hear your thoughts on this situation. Are you satisfied with how things played out for Baltimore? Do you prefer the Hendrickson path with retained draft capital? Or would you have rather seen them go all in for Crosby regardless of compensation? Let me know in the comments. I read every single response, whether you agree with my assessment or see things completely differently. Let's generate some genuine discussion, maybe even some spirited debate. But ultimately, let's keep it enjoyable. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. We're building something meaningful here, a community where authentic connection to the content and to each other creates genuine excitement about participation. I believe we're making real progress toward that goal. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it significantly helps with visibility and the algorithm. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video.